Vaginal yeast is really a symptom of a much bigger problem. See, we have these bacterial coatings in our mucous membranes inside of our nose, ears, mouth, throughout the whole gut, in the reproductive tract. It's almost identical. It crosses back and forth. The biggest pool of that flora is in the gut. In a woman's reproductive tract, she secretes this mucus coating in there, typically is called cervical mucus. And in that mucus, there's some really key things. One of them is glycogen, that's a starch that we make. And another one is immunoglobulins. Well, the normal flora inside of the reproductive tract, it feeds off of that glycogen. In the gut, it feeds off of food and other things that are in the mucus. But in the reproductive tract, it feeds primarily off of glycogen. And if that glycogen starts to change, diminish too much, then the bacteria can't feed on it anymore, and the bacteria start to diminish. Anything that creates inflammation within the mucous membrane walls of a woman's reproductive tract changes the walls, which changes the mucus secretion. And with that, if it gets more watery, if the immunoglobulins decrease, if the glycogen decreases, the bacteria can't do what they're supposed to do in there. They primarily feed off the glycogen. They excrete out lactic acid, which controls the pH of her reproductive tract, and that is her protection between the immunoglobulins, the healthy bacteria in the gut, in the flora in the reproductive tract, and the acid. Those are the three things that protect her from infections and keep everything healthy down there. If you remove any one of those, then she no longer has protection and allows pathogenic things to start to grow, things like yeast. In the reproductive tract, Candida primarily just stays in the yeast form. You get into the gut and other tissues, it can get into the fungus, fungal parasite form, and mold commonly follows along with that. So it's a really big thing. Here's some of the factors that can actually change that whole environment inside of a woman's reproductive tract to do that. Processed foods are really big. Food intolerances is a really, really big issue. Not many deal with it because they don't have a means to do so. The lab tests for food intolerances are only 2 to 3% accurate, but knowing what those are and living and eating by them is about 50% of what a health is. So they're extremely important. Hormone changes are really big. Anyone that's doing hormonal birth control or chemical birth control, they're messing the whole thing up, and the incidence of yeast infections with them is significantly higher than anyone else. Sugar in the diet, antibiotics, history of antibiotics kill off the good flora. Low omega-3 diets are a really big factor. Low and unbalanced protein diets are a really big factor. Diets that are rich in simple carbohydrates, that's a big factor. Prolonged stress is a big factor. And anything that changes the HPA axis with changes in the hormones is a big factor, and that's completely tied in to the flora, gut health, and that's what depresses thyroid and HPA axis and all of those things. So if you really want to know what's going on with this, how to fix it and how to get healthy again, really to get over this once and for all, I invite you to join us in a webinar. We're doing a webinar November 11th, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, called Candida, Leaky Gut, the Root to Almost All Illness. With that, we're going to deal with the reproductive health too, because you can't deal with one without the other. It's critically important. So I invite you to join with us. Click the link below. It'll lead you to a sign-up sheet for the webinar. And join us. You'll be glad you did. There'll be a Q&A at the end so you can get your questions answered. Extremely informative. You'll be really, really glad you did. So click the link below. Join us.